Hey there, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments.
There's something about getting forgotten by your own family that doesn't just sting. It rots you from the inside. Not in an explosive, dramatic kind of way, but in a slow, silent erosion of your self-worth that you don't even realize is happening until one day you look in the mirror and see someone who stopped expecting to be loved. That's exactly where I was the night I got the text. Just 3 words. Happy belated, sweetheart, with an exclamation point that felt more like a slap than a hug. I stared at it for a while, sitting on the edge of my bed, with my phone glowing like a cheap flashlight in the dark. No call, no gift, no card, just that lazy, last-minute attempt at remembering me, a full 7 days late. That same night, my sister Ivy posted a story on Instagram. First a boomerang of her twirling in front of the Eiffel Tower in some flowy red dress, then a video of our parents surprising her with tickets to Paris for her 30th birthday. There they were, grinning like they'd just won the lottery, hugging her in the middle of the goddamn Charles de Gaulle airport. I watched the video twice, 3 times. I even turned up the volume to hear the part where our mom said, "You deserve the world, baby girl." It felt like someone had taken a jagged nail file to the inside of my chest. I'm not the jealous type. That's not what this is. This is about something deeper, something older. It's about years of being the fallback option, the afterthought, the responsible daughter who never needed much, so never got much. Ivy, she cried if her toast was cut the wrong way. She wrecked Dad's Buick at 17 and still got a new one the next year for Christmas. Me? I worked 2 jobs to pay for community college and drove the same rusted-out Civic from high school until it died on a freeway off-ramp. And that was fine. I told myself I didn't need the praise, didn't need the attention. But the truth is, no matter how grown up you get, there's still that kid inside you who just wants their parents to look at them like they matter. Growing up, birthdays were always the day that difference between us came into full focus. Ivy's parties had ponies, bounce houses, photographers, even one year a clown that arrived in a limo. Don't ask. Mine? A cake from Safeway, and maybe dinner at Olive Garden if my dad wasn't working late. But I didn't complain. I'd tell myself Ivy was younger, more delicate, more in need of the fuss. That's what our mom always said. "Ivy's sensitive, Jules. You're strong. You always have been." Like strength was this endless reservoir I was supposed to pull from while they poured everything they had into keeping Ivy from cracking. This year, though, something snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't text back. I didn't even mention it. I just sat there sipping a glass of wine that I poured myself at 9:30 at night, in silence, staring at their text like it came from strangers. A birthday 1 week late, acknowledged like a chore. Not a call, not a voice, just a ghost of sentiment, sent from people who flew across the ocean for the other daughter. You know what's funny? I even checked the date to make sure I wasn't going crazy. I scrolled back through the calendar on my phone like maybe I'd made some mistake. Maybe I was wrong about the day. I wasn't. It was them. And it had always been them. People like to say parents love all their kids equally, and maybe in their heads they believe that's true. But there's always one they root for, one they protect, and one they use when they're tired of trying. That night, something inside me went still. Not angry, not hurt, just still. Like I'd stopped swimming in a pool I never realized was freezing. And you know what? That kind of silence is dangerous. It's the kind of silence where plans are born, where the old rules of family loyalty start to rot, and you begin to see things for what they really are. I didn't respond to the text. I didn't fake a thank you or send a heart emoji. I let it sit there, unread. I poured another glass of wine and turned off my phone. But in the back of my mind, a thought started forming. A sharp, clear thought I'd never let myself entertain before. If they ever need something from me, I won't say no. I won't scream or cry or give them a piece of my mind. No, I'll do something better. I'll say yes, and then I'll make them wish they'd never asked. So let me ask you this, and be honest with yourself. Have you ever sat quietly while someone you loved handed your worth to somebody else, wrapped in a bow? Have you ever swallowed the kind of pain that doesn't come with bruises, but leaves scars anyway? If you have, then you know what I felt in that moment. And if you haven't, well, keep listening, because that silence, that moment where I didn't reply, that was the beginning of the end. Not for me, for them. It's strange how the people who hurt you the most always seem to think everything's fine, like the damage they leave behind gets wiped clean just because they never had to face it head on. And that's exactly what came flooding into my chest when Ivy called me from her 5-star Parisian hotel, her voice crackling through the speaker like it had been pulled straight from a perfume commercial, sugary and bright, completely unaware of the tidal wave building just beneath my silence. She didn't ask how I was or what I'd done for my birthday, didn't even mention the fact that our parents had ghosted me for a week. She just launched into a breathless description of the croissants, the architecture, and some life-changing art exhibit she'd seen at the Louvre, like we were two best friends catching up after college, like the ocean between us was filled with nothing but shared memories, instead of years of imbalance and erasure. And I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct her. I didn't even hint that I knew what had happened. I just listened, the way I've been trained to my entire life. Nod along, say, "That's nice," and swallow the hard parts whole. That's how it's always been with Ivy. She lives on a different frequency than the rest of us, tuned into a world where consequences are optional and applause is a given. And for most of our lives, I thought that was just her personality. But the truth is, it wasn't just Ivy being Ivy. It was our parents shaping her world into a bubble and blowing mine into a balloon, just sturdy enough to carry their expectations, but never full enough to float. You want to know what childhood looked like in our house? Picture this. Ivy comes home with a note from school about skipping class, and my mom rushes to defend her with, "Maybe the teacher misunderstood her." I come home with an A- instead of an A, and Dad tells me, "You need to stop slacking." She got grounded once, for 2 days, after stealing our neighbor's mail as a joke. I got grounded for an entire month when I didn't answer my phone during a group project meeting. They used to say I was the self-starter, the strong one, and I believed them for a long time. I thought being strong meant I didn't need as much, didn't deserve as much, because people only handed out help to the ones who cried loud enough. But what they were really saying, what they'd always been saying, was that Ivy deserved to be saved, and I was there to do the saving. And let me tell you something about being the strong one. It doesn't make you proud, it makes you tired. You get used to carrying things alone. You start to expect that no one's coming for you, no matter how bad it gets. You don't even know how to ask for help because you're scared someone might give it to you, and then hold it over your head like a favor you never earned. So you just don't ask. You show up, you make the phone calls, you pay the bills, you stay married longer than you should because you're not supposed to break. And when you do, like I did after 15 years with Mark, you hide the pieces and tell people it was mutual, even though it wasn't. Even though you were the only one fighting to stay married while he slipped out the door, one weekend at a time. After the call ended, I just sat there staring at the wall, and for the first time in years, I let the silence stretch longer than I was comfortable with. I didn't text her back, I didn't check her stories, I didn't replay the Paris video, I just sat, and then I pulled out a little spiral notebook from the drawer next to my bed and wrote down a single sentence. Stop reaching first. It was like writing a spell, a charm against the version of me that had spent her whole damn life extending the olive branch. I wasn't angry, I wasn't jealous, I was done. A few days later, Mom called. Not to apologize, not to talk about the birthday. She wanted to ask if I could help Ivy with something, some business idea, some startup she was tinkering with, some vision she had for a wellness line or crystal shop or who the hell knows what. The details didn't matter. The pattern did. Ivy dreams and I deliver. That's the rhythm they've always known, the unspoken dance we've all done for decades. And this time, for the first time in my life, I just said, "I'll have to think about it," and hung up. I could hear the confusion in her voice before the line went dead. The hesitation, the subtle crack in her composure. That tiny shift in the air when someone realizes they've lost their grip on something they never had to hold on to in the first place. And that moment, God, that moment, it gave me more peace than I've ever gotten from their approval. Later that night, I told Riley, my neighbor, about the call. He's a 60-something retired firefighter who watches his lawn like it's a newborn baby and always smells like sawdust and honesty. He raised one eyebrow and said, "Sounds like you finally put your foot down. Took you long enough." I laughed, but he didn't. He just looked at me and said, "You keep waiting for them to notice you're drowning, Jules, but they've been standing on the dock the whole time, clapping for your sister's diving tricks." And just like that, I understood something I hadn't before. I wasn't waiting for them to change anymore. I was waiting for them to need me, because that's when I'd make it count. There's a particular kind of silence that settles in the weeks after you draw a boundary with people who've never had to live with one. A stillness so sharp it starts to hum beneath your skin, not because you miss them, because you don't, but because a part of you keeps waiting for the backlash that never comes right away, only later, when the walls are already cracked and the water starts seeping through. That silence was broken for me on a Thursday morning in March, 2 months after my birthday, when my phone lit up with a voicemail notification from my father. Not a call, just a message. Not urgent, at least not at first glance, but something about seeing his name on the screen again made my stomach turn, like my body knew before my brain did that the favor was coming. When I pressed play, his voice was tight, clipped, like he was forcing calm through clenched teeth, and he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Hey, Julia, it's Dad. Your mother and I, well, we're in a bit of a situation. I don't want to get into the details over voicemail, but it's serious. We need to talk. Please call me back when you can. Love you." There it was, that tiny, unearned "love you" at the end, thrown in like a wet towel over a grease fire, and it nearly made me laugh. I hadn't heard from either of them since the business with Ivy's wellness line, which turned out to be a few crystals glued onto recycled wood boards and sold for $90 a piece on Etsy. I didn't ask questions. I didn't offer help. And when Mom called again a few weeks later to follow up, I let it ring out. But now that the stakes had shifted, now that the favor wasn't for Ivy but for them directly, the urgency had arrived. I waited 3 days before calling him back, not out of spite, out of control. I needed to feel what it was like to hold the power in that dynamic, to know that I could choose when or if I'd answer. And when I finally did, I kept my voice even, calm, like I wasn't surprised, like I'd expected this. He didn't waste time. "We're in trouble, Jules," he said, and this time, he wasn't trying to hide it. Their mortgage was 6 months behind, and the bank had started sending pre-foreclosure letters. My dad had lost his job 6 months ago, laid off, no severance, just a cold email and a box to pack his desk. He'd been using credit cards to fill the gaps, but that dam had burst, and now they were staring down the barrel of losing the house they'd lived in for 37 years. My mother, of course, hadn't worked in over 2 decades, unless you count yoga classes and Pinterest boards about Mediterranean diets. He didn't blame her. He never did. He didn't ask outright, not at first. He just laid out the numbers like a map, walking me through how it all spiraled, the taxes they didn't see coming, the home repair they deferred too long, the retirement funds they dipped into during COVID. And then came the moment, soft, almost apologetic. We didn't know who else to call. That line hit me harder than the numbers. Because it wasn't true. They did know. They just didn't like the answer they'd get from Ivy, who was too busy promoting lavender-infused moon water on Instagram to notice their roof was leaking. Ivy, who had never been expected to handle anything harder than a group dinner reservation. Ivy, who had always been the one they protected, even if it meant letting me handle the storm on my own. "We're not asking for a gift," he added quickly, like that changed anything. "We'd pay you back, slowly of course, but we'd make it right. $30,000, that's what they needed to keep the house. That's what it would take to clean up the years of poor planning, denial, and parental favoritism, disguised as love. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I just said, let me think about it. And I meant it. Not because I was considering giving them the money, oh no, I knew exactly what I was going to do with that offer, but because I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to sit in the very same silence they'd given me all my life and wonder if I'd show up. That night, I pulled out my notebook again, the same one where I'd written, "Stop reaching first." This time, I wrote something different. Debt makes people honest. And then I started writing down a plan. I wasn't going to say no. That would have been too easy, too clean. I was going to say yes, but not their kind of yes. Not the kind that came with warm hugs and soft promises. Mine would be cold, calculated, and bound in paper. If they wanted to be saved, they would have to sign for it. Literally. I didn't want revenge in the form of shouting matches or tearful confessions. I didn't want an apology that came too late. What I wanted was power. The quiet kind that made people think twice before dialing your number. The kind that settled debts with silence, not emotion. So I called a lawyer, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. There's something remarkably clarifying about the moment you realize that love, especially the kind you've bent over backwards your whole life trying to earn, can be put on paper, notarized, and filed away in a drawer where it won't expire just because someone forgets your birthday or remembers your name only when their roof is collapsing. That realization hit me square in the chest as I sat across from my parents at that god-awful Italian chain restaurant they liked. One of those places with laminated menus and fake ivy stapled to the walls, where the waitstaff are trained to ask if you're celebrating anything special, even if you're clearly just there to talk business or bury a body. The tablecloth had a faint stain in one corner, a reminder that no place, just like no relationship, is ever as clean as it pretends to be. And I took that as a sign that what we were about to do couldn't be undone once the first word was spoken. I'd told them I wanted to talk face to face, that we should meet for lunch to go over options, which they took as a hopeful sign that their oldest daughter, the ever-dependable, ever-available Julia, was going to swoop in and make the problem go away with a gentle smile and a kind heart. What they didn't know, what they hadn't even imagined, was that I'd already consulted an attorney, spent 3 hours with a real estate advisor, and drafted a document that would change the trajectory of our family dynamic forever. And as I pulled the manila folder out of my bag, watching my father stiffen and my mother's eyebrows twitch just slightly, I realized that no amount of parenting books or parenting failures could have prepared them for the woman they had accidentally created. "This is a contract," I began, unfolding the pages slowly, deliberately, like I wanted every single word to land with the weight of a piano dropped from a rooftop. "It outlines the terms under which I will pay off your mortgage, bring your account current, and prevent foreclosure. In return, the deed to the house will be transferred to me. You'll remain in the home, but ownership will be mine. You'll pay no rent, but you'll be tenants, on paper and legally." My mother blinked first, her expression flickering between confusion and the early tremors of panic. "Wait, you want to own the house?" she asked, her voice doing that quivery, high-pitched thing it always did when she realized the narrative was no longer hers to write. "But it's our home. Your father and I built this life." "And now I'm offering to protect it," I interrupted, not sharply but firmly, with the tone of someone who has finally decided that their emotional labor deserves a ledger. "But I'm not doing that without security, because I know what happens when you give without boundaries. I've lived it, I've paid for it, and I'm done pretending that being your daughter means I'm some kind of emotional aid." My father, for his part, stayed quiet for longer than I expected, staring at the papers with the kind of furrowed intensity that reminded me of those nights he used to spend working late in the den, balancing checkbooks and muttering about the price of gas, like the world was always a little too heavy for him, but never quite heavy enough to consider, asking me what I was carrying. "How much exactly?" he asked finally, and there it was, his way of conceding, not with an apology, not with recognition, but with math. 30,000, I said without flinching. "Paid directly to the lender. I've spoken with them. I've arranged it. But I'm not making a gift. This is a business transaction. You can live there as long as you like, but the house will be mine. No more ambiguity, no more assumptions. My mother, who had once given Ivy a down payment for her first condo without so much as a conversation, looked at me like I'd just announced my intention to sell their organs on the black market. "You don't trust us?" she asked, breathy, as if the idea itself was unthinkable. I didn't answer that question directly. I didn't have to. The truth had already been written in the margins of every forgotten birthday, every late text, every silent call when I was the one who needed help and none came. So instead, I slid a pen across the table, let it rest against the edge of the contract like a quiet dare, and said, "This is how I love now, not with words, with signatures." It took them 5 minutes to sign. My father didn't look me in the eye. My mother's hand shook slightly as she wrote her name, as if the ink itself might judge her, and as they passed the papers back, I could feel something permanent shift in the air between us. Not anger, not grief, but something colder, more grounded. An understanding. The bridge they thought would always exist was now a toll road, and I held the coin. Later, as I drove home, with the folder buckled into the passenger seat like a fragile heirloom, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt calm, like I had finally walked out of a burning building and shut the door behind me without looking back. This wasn't revenge, not really. This was balance. This was the math finally working in my favor. And just before bed, as I poured myself a glass of wine and stared out the kitchen window at the neighbor's porch light flickering in the wind, I opened my notebook one more time and wrote a single sentence across the page. When they ask who saved them, they'll have to say my name with the taste of ink and pride in their mouths. Because I knew what was coming next, and it wasn't forgiveness, it was the housewarming. It's one thing to win the game when no one thought you were playing. It's another to stand in the middle of the board afterward. Surrounded by pieces you didn't just move. You redesigned, repainted, and forced everyone else to play by your rules. That's what it felt like when I stepped into my parents' house that first morning as its legal owner, the scent of old pine cleaner and fading entitlement still clinging to the hallway air. The sun slanting through the blinds like it had always belonged to someone else and was now asking me what I planned to do with all this inherited history. The silence wasn't heavy, it was expectant, like the walls themselves were waiting to see if I'd keep my word or become the villain they secretly hoped I would be. The paperwork had gone through quickly, faster than expected, honestly. My lawyer was efficient, precise, and had clearly dealt with families like mine before. Families that smiled in public but turned transactional the second real money came into the picture. I received the deed via certified mail, embossed with the county seal, and the weight of a lifetime of imbalance corrected in one legal maneuver. I held it for a long time before filing it away in a lockbox, running my fingers over the raised lettering like it was braille for a different kind of language, one where justice spoke in signatures and not apologies. I didn't evict them, I didn't pack their boxes or change the locks. That would have been easy, clean, and ultimately too generous. What I did instead was something far more surgical. I reorganized. I moved into the master bedroom, not because I needed more space, but because it had always been the center of the house, the throne room, the sacred ground they'd defended for decades. They didn't say anything when I made the announcement. My mother blinked a few times, as if trying to compute whether this was some kind of metaphorical punishment, and my father just nodded once, tight-lipped, probably calculating what else he might lose if he argued. I had their bedroom cleared out by movers the following afternoon, not discarded, just relocated, meticulously, respectfully, but without ceremony. Their new quarters were the smaller guest room at the back of the house, the one with the weak sunlight and the creaky vent, the one that had once been mine for 2 years after my divorce, when I'd crawled back home bleeding and embarrassed, and they'd offered me 4 weeks and not a day more. It felt right, not out of cruelty, but symmetry. When Ivy arrived that weekend, fresh from her influencer retreat in Sedona or Costa Rica, or wherever she was the last time someone else cleaned up her mess, She was wearing a floppy hat and an attitude that reeked of passive concern. "You kicked them out of their own bedroom?" she asked, her voice rising with that performative edge she always used when pretending to take the moral high ground. "Jules, don't you think that's a little extreme?" I didn't answer right away. I let the question sit, let the tension rise around it like heat from a stovetop, and then I turned to her slowly and said, "I didn't kick them out. I moved in. That's different. This house is mine now. They agreed to that. And if you're so concerned, maybe next time you can help pay off a few thousand in back mortgage before you critique my interior design choices." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a goldfish realizing the tank water had turned to ice. She didn't respond. She didn't have to, because she finally understood what I'd known since the day that belated birthday text landed in my inbox. Like a slap with a smile, people like her only function in worlds that orbit around them. And when gravity shifts, they don't know how to stand upright. That evening, I hosted what I jokingly referred to as a housewarming. It wasn't a party, God no, not in the glitter and streamers sense, but a gathering of a few neighbors, old friends from work, and Riley, of course, who brought over a six-pack and a box of ribs like it was Sunday in the South. My parents were invited, but only if they helped set up, helped serve, helped participate. No longer guests of honor, no longer royalty, just residents like everyone else. My mother stood in the kitchen for most of it, looking slightly lost, like a queen without her crown, stirring a bowl of dip with one hand while holding a wine glass in the other. My father stayed quiet, drifting between small talk and long silences, his presence more ghost than man. And Ivy, she didn't stay long. She had a photo shoot the next morning. Of course she did. Riley pulled me aside around 9, when the laughter had gotten louder and the house finally sounded like it belonged to someone who had earned it. He looked around, nodded, and said, "You know, they'll never admit it, but they needed this. Someone to remind them what gravity feels like." I smiled, not because I agreed, but because I knew he was half right. They didn't just need gravity. They needed to see the world from the angle they'd forced me to live in for 40-plus years. After everyone left, I stood in the living room alone, the soft hum of the dishwasher in the background and the faint sound of my parents whispering in their now smaller bedroom. And I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Weightless, but not in a way that meant I was floating or lost. Weightless because I'd finally dropped the load they made me carry, the one labeled second choice, fallback, helper, and invisible. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I'll ever get the apology I've earned, or if they'll come to see me as more than a walking solution to their mistakes. I don't even know if this peace will last. But I do know that when they tell people who saved them, who stepped in and did the thing their golden child couldn't or wouldn't, they'll have to say my name. And they'll have to say it in my house, with my rules. And whether they whisper it in shame or shout it in gratitude, I'll be fine either way. Because this time, I made the ending.